Isaac Newton is regarded as one of the most logical thinkers to ever live, but in 1720 he made a very irrational decision that caused him to lose a good portion of his fortune. Newton got caught up in the South Sea Bubble, one of the largest financial crashes in history. The bubble began when behind the scenes, a toxic combination of insider trading, government bribes, and fraud caused company shares to swell far beyond their actual value. From January to August of 1720, shares skyrocketed from £128 to over £1,000. As stock prices rose to unrealistic levels, Newton made the wise decision to sell his shares for a 100% profit. However, as prices continued to rise, the logical genius uncharacteristically decided to reinvest his earnings. By September, the market crashed and took Newton's fortune with it. Even Newton himself was surprised by his decision. In fact, after the crash, he reportedly said that he could calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. The question most people have when they hear this story is, why would such a logical man make such a foolish decision? And the answer to that question is quite simple. Newton's fateful decision was the result of a lack of self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to manage your emotions, recognize your tendencies, and align your behavior with your values. As stock prices rose, Newton's emotions took over and persuaded him to reinvest his earnings. Self-awareness is a fundamental skill that impacts nearly everything you say and do. And with high self-awareness, you improve your ability to communicate, build relationships, and make decisions. Unfortunately, self-awareness isn't an easy skill to master. Research by author Tasha Eurich shows that 95% of us think we're self-aware when only 10 to 15% actually are. Studies also show that 83% of top performers rank high in self-awareness. Therefore, it goes without saying that there's tremendous value in learning how to become more self-aware. Before we talk about how to improve self-awareness, I want to start by defining the 3 types of self-awareness. The first type is biological self-awareness. Biological self-awareness is the ability to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the human brain. Through evolution, the brain has developed a list of tendencies. These tendencies influence our behavior in both helpful and harmful ways. So while our brain has the ability to develop helpful habits, it also tends to be inherently lazy, which is why we are easily influenced by cognitive biases. Now, at this level, we are all the same. Anyone with a brain is influenced by these same tendencies. Those who are biologically self-aware understand these tendencies and how they can affect behavior. As a result, they can avoid being influenced by the weaknesses of the brain. The second type of awareness is internal self-awareness. Internal self-awareness is the ability to understand yourself. Internally self-aware people understand their values and goals, their emotions and behaviors, and their strengths and weaknesses. Those who are internally self-aware have a strong sense of who they are and what they want. They play to their strengths, and they are effective at managing their emotions. Now, at this level, we are all different. Who you are, what you want, and how you feel are unique to you. The third type of awareness is external self-awareness. External self-awareness is the ability to understand how others see us, and externally self-aware people realize how their behavior affects other people. Because externally self-aware people are able to recognize emotions in others, they're more effective at building and maintaining relationships, they're better negotiators, and in general, they're more influential. All right, now that you understand the 3 types of self-awareness, let's talk about how you can become more self-aware. To begin, let's talk about how to become more biologically self-aware. Many of our tendencies that are created by the strengths and weaknesses of the human brain occur on a subconscious level. We build habits on a subconscious level, we're influenced by cognitive biases on a subconscious level, and we're even motivated by many things on a subconscious level. Now, because these tendencies occur at a subconscious level, it can make them very hard to recognize. But by learning about these tendencies, you can increase your odds of recognizing them when they do occur. So, for example, the anchoring bias is a cognitive bias that can influence you to pay too much when buying a car. But until you know what the anchoring bias is, then you can't be aware of it. To that end, the best way to become more biologically self-aware is through education. If you're looking to improve your internal self-awareness, here are 2 ideas that you can try. Idea number one is to get clear about who you are and what you want. One way to become more internally self-aware is by defining clear goals and values. And that's because the process of defining what's important to you establishes a list of guidelines that can help direct your decisions. So, as an example, let's say you have the goal of getting married and you value a drug-free life. Well, in that case, if you go on a first date and you discover that your date is either a drug user or doesn't want to get married, then your goals and values make it clear that there's no reason to go on a second date. Now, to set clear goals and values, it helps to think 5, 10, or 20 years into the future and ask yourself, where do you want to end up? Then, once you figure out where that is, then you can use that destination to guide your decisions. The second idea for becoming more internally self-aware is to identify your strengths and weaknesses. Identifying your strengths is important because it allows you to set your life up in a way that takes advantage of them. You can identify your strengths by asking yourself the following 3 questions. What comes easily? What am I better at than most people? And because we typically enjoy what we're good at, what do I enjoy? Once you understand your strengths, it's also important to identify your weaknesses. And that's because doing so helps you identify what you should avoid, when to get help, and what you need to improve. You can identify your weaknesses by asking yourself the exact opposite questions that helped you identify your strengths. And those are, what do I find challenging? What is something that most people are better at than me? And what is something I don't enjoy? When it comes to improving external self-awareness, it's important to recognize that how you see yourself isn't always how other people see you. So you might think that you're open to other people's opinions, but your coworkers might think otherwise. Knowing this, the best way to become more externally self-aware is by better understanding how other people perceive you. And there's 3 ways that you can do that. The first is by listening. Now, in some cases, people will openly tell you how they feel and what they're thinking. And in these cases, becoming more externally self-aware is pretty easy. And that's because as long as you're willing to listen and hear what they have to say, then you should gain a better understanding of how they're feeling and how they perceive you. The second way to become more externally self-aware is by asking. A lot of people won't openly tell you how they're feeling or what they're thinking, but most people will give you some feedback if you ask for it. So to that end, you can become more externally self-aware by asking people how they feel and what they're thinking. The third and final way to become more externally self-aware is by watching. In some cases, people won't be comfortable using their words to tell you how they feel or what they think about you. Whatever their reason is, the one thing that you can rely on in these situations is body language. And that's because body language almost always tells the truth. Body language is a rather complicated topic, and if you've read a book on the subject, you might have came away more confused than you were when you started. The reason for this is most books on the topic give you what feels like a million different hand and foot and limb positions to analyze, and this only confuses most people. Now, after reading many books on the topic myself, I've discovered one trick that makes body language a lot easier to understand. Anytime you're trying to understand somebody's body language, you can ask yourself one simple question, and that is, are they trying to connect or are they trying to protect? You see, when somebody feels comfortable with you, they often try to increase the strength of the relationship bond by connecting with you. Examples of connecting behavior are smiling, eye contact, and turning towards you. In contrast, when people feel uncomfortable with you, they often try to weaken the relationship bond by protecting themselves from you. And examples of protecting behaviors are eye rolling, turning away from you, and avoiding eye contact. The reason this trick works is because most of us are naturally familiar with these signals. We all know that smiling is a good thing and eye rolling is a bad thing. So by asking yourself, is this person trying to connect with me or protect themselves from me, gives you a really clear indication of how that person is feeling and how they're perceiving you. And in general, if you notice connecting behaviors, then that's a sign that you should continue doing what you're doing. But in contrast, if you notice protecting behaviors, then that's a clue that you should probably evaluate your behavior.